there's a big question here. Some people have given up on the fight against white supremacist co-opting of Viking imagery. Others are still continuing their research and trying to properly explain Viking culture and mythology. A key point that white supremacists seem to miss is that the Vikings traveled all over the place and mated with those populations. Yeah, okay. I have less info regarding Anglo-Saxon research having to face off against white supremacists co-opting Anglo-Saxon imagery and culture. I think ultimately as archaeologists, we do have a responsibility to keep communicating to the public accurate and true information in a way that the average public can information. Fighting misinformation is a continuous fight, but in this current world is necessary, absolutely. But I think that one of the things that Sutton Hoo does tell us and keeps us humble is that you don't know everything and you have to leave it open for other interpretations to occur. There's always new information coming forward. This is what makes us, want to be a part of this discipline, is that you're never going to get a one answer. There are always different answers coming forward, and every person from different backgrounds has different perspectives to bring. And that is the beauty of diversity in the discipline. That is the beauty of being part of this,
I think
and encouraging other people who are not who are not looking like you to go and be part of this discipline.
I think it's very difficult too. I grew up before the internet existed.
Oh yeah, he's old.
And so my access to information was, to me, you could argue that my access to information was censored, but
especially from your mother.
I don't know if it was censored. I think there was certainly less exposure to the more fantastical kind of discussions that go on in the world, and I think that's kind of it's a two-edged sword of modern technology. It gives us such great accessibility to information. I mean, there's stuff that there's stuff which I couldn't research.
Yeah.
I wasn't able to research as a student, which I now would have really, really easy access to, but that comes at a price, because there's also these other people in the world who are telling stuff and how you educate young people to realize the difference. I think it's entirely down to maybe things like when I went to Sutton Hoo, there was a huge group of young people there, very diverse, like from all countries in the world, all types of backgrounds, and I think that's one of the major things that archaeology can do in terms of educating. It's not about maybe the academic stuff you study, but actually participating in a project like that where you meet such a diverse group of people and you realize how different the world is and how different cultures can exist. I'm sure there's people there who didn't enjoy themselves very much because sometimes the weather was horrible.
You were 15 when you started there, right? You were 15.
Yeah, but
how in the heck, you don't know nothing when you're 15, right? And then you came and learned things. I don't know what you learned, but that's fine.
No, but also, I think it's a huge thing to be there, to meet diverse. It's one of. I mean, I didn't go to university to learn about archaeology. I went to university to be exposed to different experiences, and that's my. That's how I feel about stuff.
So here's our plea then to all, like as closing parting shots, right? Is get everybody to do a critical reading and writing course in archaeology.
What's this one?
So there you go.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So this is what I think we should do: is open around, have every single student everywhere around the world do a MOOC or whatever, and also get on site and actually do some hard work.
Yeah. No. I mean, it's a difficult. I really enjoy myself. I learned a huge amount about archaeology. I was taught by some very helpful people, and I went on, and the people who kind of excavated at Sutton Hoo went on to become a commercial archaeology company that was based out of a university, and they went on and did many more excavations kind of within Britain and Europe, and I think they were successful at what they did, and I think their methodology is very interesting, even though it was very different to some of the other ways that people were doing archaeology.
That's fine. It doesn't have to do everything the same. So yeah, so that's Vero wants to ask a question, I think.
There's another question just above Vero too.
The multiple human remains on the site. Do we know if they were buried there as a form of heroic cult around the funeral chamber, or was it family members?
So in answer to that question, all of the burials that were distributed around the burial mounds, so the non-mound inhumations, were later in date and they were execution victims. But the other burials that were within the mounds, they do belong to the same kind of
people,
I don't know what word to use, like the same group, the same set of people.
Family.
And there were one or two kind of, the only exception to that was that there were some children who were buried. They were not execution victims, but their mounds were there was nothing left of a mound above them, but there was a ditch around them, which suggests material was taken out of the ditch to build a mound. And they had kind of miniature versions of the grave goods. Yeah. So
they probably were part of that family.
So some of the younger burials were associated with the mound burials. Yes.
Cool bananas.
Has a question next, but she hasn't written it out. So
what's your question?
Is it me? Yeah. Yes. Okay. Hey, Shannon. Sorry, that was fun for you to talk about. That I enjoyed the film personally, but I kind of wanted to change tack a bit and ask Toby, because it's so you dug there with Martin Carver and Toby basically.
Yes. Yeah.
That's cool. That's ace. Oh no, and so I was really interested to see the way they dug the site, like, you know, when you were, because I kind of, me and Vehu were talking, you know, basically doing our own discussion to the side. I didn't quite hear what you said about how the way they dug it, because it looked like they had bulks and big open areas, but they dug it like open area excavation stratigraphically.
Yeah. So we had a series of what we called horizons. So horizon 0 is the turf, and horizon 8 is the kind of lowest level that we reached. And at each of those horizons, you could see features of different dates. So depending on, how can I explain it? So throughout the whole of those areas, we took the different horizons down, and each horizon was mapped. So immediately under the turf, horizon 2 was where we could see all the World War II features. Then as you go through time, we created maps of the visibility of these things on the soil surface. So the final horizon 8, all you could see at that level is the prehistoric features and the really deep medieval burial chambers. And the bulks, they existed. What we did with the bulks was we used those to create profiles through the whole site, but we never left them. It was like a cumulative thing. So they were only ever about half a meter high. They were recorded and taken away, but then we'd do another half a meter. So when the excavation finished, we had profiles through all of the horizons, but they were up in one go.
That could help. It's like stepping it back almost as you dig it, rather than opening the area all at once and following the. That's really interesting. The
whole area was, because what we did was the whole area was open, and we would spray it with water and clean it with trowels, which then led us to be able to take photographs of each area and then map. I can't explain it. So the photographs existed, and then you create a map as well. And then when we were kind of deciding what to excavate, we had big folders of photographs with the maps on top of them. So we could decide, okay, well, you're going to deal with these features and we're going to deal with these things. So, and it was all based around what fitted on a big sheet of permatrace at 1 to 10. That was that. It was like, okay, well, because there's no other real way of, that was kind of just made it simple, really.
Yeah, at the time, that's what you had.
Yeah,
Permatrace is ace, though.
Yeah, but there's loads of other ways of doing it, but I felt that we used that exclusively in all the projects and went on and did, and it works. Even on very, very deep urban, we did some really deep urban excavations in York, and we used the same methodology, and it all still works.
Yeah.
So, did I also then hear you say Tarbert as well, Shannon?
Yeah.
Did you dig up there with Martin Carver as well then, Toby? Yeah. Oh, cool. Ace.
Yeah, no, I dug both. I dug at Sutton Hoo and Tart, both of those places. Yeah.
Ah, cool, neat. Ah, it's really interesting. I was just nerding out on methods.
We need to chat more at some point.
Yeah. Anna has a question. She wants to know, aside from the bling and the top treasures, what is your favorite object from Sutton Hoo and why? And she directs that to yourself.
I know
The
there's
tea
a
shop.
no.
No.
I do believe there's. I'm not sure if I remember. I'm pretty sure there's a dog collar,
Yes,
and that's pretty like.
that's evocative. Yeah.
You know, the dog collar, and there's like hawking. You know, there's accessories which there's some very glorious jewelry there, but there's also the things of these people's like everyday lives. So the dog collar's pretty good, and I think there's a oh, what is it? There's a pillow that's
The
just
pillow
a
has
pillow.
duck feathers.
The
like,
pillow's got
yeah,
like duck feathers in
Yeah,
it. So
yeah.
obviously, although this guy, or well, whoever was in Mound 1 is a warrior, but he's also interested in being comfortable and just
Or no, the people who buried him are
yes,
interested in him.
yeah.
Let's
But
put that
I
out,
think
okay.
the dog collar is pretty evocative because to me that suggests a kind
A
of
human being.
yeah, just a tangible.
Yeah.
That's a tangible thing you can understand,
Yeah. For me, it's a bitumen, but you didn't ask, but that's okay. I'm really excited about that. Navy, what do you expect? Yeah, so I think those are all the questions that are put out there or whatever, but it's
yeah. I mean,
we love that
I'm
place.
kind of really boring, but if anyone ever has questions about this kind of thing, and I think one of the things we haven't really talked about is I'm always interested in how Martin Carver thinks about things, and his other publications, I think they provide a very interesting way of looking at archaeology compared to some of the more, well, not traditional, but
it's just a different way.
I think it's nice to be aware of all of these schools of thought.
Yeah. Guys, sorry to interrupt. I had my hand up, but I put a little question in. Just I know we're probably running out of time. I'm definitely not an archaeologist, so talk to me like you would talk to a tourist at an interpretation center. I'm really, obviously the bling, as Shannon mentioned, is really interesting, and that's what gets people kind of excited, I guess. But I'm a maritime person, so I'm actually fascinated by the ship. And I realize that the ship's doesn't technically quote unquote exist anymore because it's sort of lost to time, but the structures and the transverse members and the riveting style and all that, I mean, to someone who is knowledgeable about ancient construction techniques, that must have yielded some pretty amazing insights as to how people built vessels of that size. 90 feet is a very, very long ship for that time, I would think. Has anyone ever looked at it strictly from a maritime engineering or?
Yeah, there was in the excavation, Bruce Mitford's excavation after the 1939 excavation. There was a Royal Naval Architect, Commander Hutchinson, who created a map and a very, very detailed survey of the vessel from a naval architect's point of view.
Wow.
And they then used that once he'd created all those measurements and the plans, they then went and made a three-dimensional fiberglass mold of the ship. So that does exist like that. And then there's currently
Right now they're building a ship on.
Yeah, there's a group of people who kind of have an association with the excavation, and Woodbridge, which is the nearest town, it's where I learned to sail, and it's a huge area where people used to sail or still do sail. And I can't remember the name of the group, but I think it's called the Sutton Hoo Ships Company.
Yeah.
And they're currently rebuilding the ship with the prospect of they just laid the keel, and once it's finished, they're gonna be doing sea trials, and everything they're doing is completely authentic to how it would have been done in the period.
Oh, cool.
So it's pretty interesting. And they were open to the public, but now I believe what they're doing is they're running everything through Zoom and webcam, so you can watch the ship being constructed.
Yeah, I think I got it on my phone, I'm afraid, but I think that is the website URL there. You can also have a look at the Roskilde Viking Ship Museum as well, which is excellent when it comes to explaining things very clearly about different ship techniques, of that period and slightly later in Viking Age. But certainly, that'll be of interest to you, I think, as well.
Cool. Thank you very much.
There's too much to talk about, really. But I mean,
no, it's just there's that. But that's one of the interesting things about the site is that there's so much there.
It's something for everyone.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah,
I also have interesting trivia for you in case you're interested about this.
sure.
The gentleman who replaced those two famous competent archaeologists, the two ladies who were replaced by this composite character, he is played by a person named Johnny Flynn. And Johnny Flynn, I don't know if anyone's aware, is a songwriter, actor who actually is involved with the Detectorists TV show.
Okay, yes, yeah.
Wrote the theme song. So he must be an amateur detectorist himself, I guess, because he keeps popping up in archaeology themed movies and TV. So anyway.
So yeah, and as a Suffolk man born and bred, strong in arm, and
Yeah,
I'm not going to say the rest of it.
that's-
But
yeah.
how was Ray Fine's accent in your mind?
He's pretty. He sounds like my grandpa. That's what my
Mm.
grandpa sounds like. But that's the other thing I should say too is that I was really, really lucky in that my parents lived about 10 miles from Sutton Hoo, and so when I got kind of politely asked to leave school, they were like, "What are we going to do with this individual?" And I was given the option of going to work there as a young
opposed to prison.
person. No,
So,
to prison,
okay,
but,
well, okay.
but and I think that's I would definitely encourage anyone who is able to participate in things like this, because I think it's just it's really good fun, and it was just a very, I can't remember what I'm talking about.
It was a formative experience
Yeah,
for him.
it was really useful for
Yep. Yeah.
me, and not a kind of entire waste of time. That's. I think it's it's like my daughter today is very stressed about her 3 tests she had at school, and I think that's something which I never cared about, stuff like that. And I think you need to look, when you're bringing up your own children, or when you're talking to students, maybe 90% isn't what they should be focusing at, because I never got a 90%, I never got anything, but I worked in archaeology for I still do archaeology now, so I think it's definitely something to think about when it comes to
Grades are not everything. I think is what we're trying to say.
especially the world, the way
Yeah.
that people do get stressed about this kind of stuff,
Yeah, it's true. It's true. So yeah, we'd like to thank you all for
Yes.
joining us and for joining the Newfoundland Labrador Archaeology Society for the FABS. And if you wish to become a member of the society, certainly go to the Facebook page, and the details are there. We encourage all peoples, whether or not you're working within the discipline or not. And in fact, we encourage the people who are not, because you're more interesting in some regards. So it's all good. And yeah, so it's lovely to see some familiar faces there, and it's really lovely to see everybody. And I think that in this pandemic time, things like this have to happen more frequently, to be fair. If we go back to before, I don't want to go back to before, we should move on, right? So it's all good.